Hi everyone, this is ML, and we're now going to look at part 2 of your on-job coaching module. And this part deals with designing the 3-part structure before you actually do the on-job coaching session. Our quote for this module: each person holds so much power within themselves that needs to be let out. Sometimes they just need a little nudge, a little direction, a little support, a little coaching, and the greatest things can happen. And that is the importance of being a coach. Your nudge, your direction and support can bring out the full potential and give people the confidence they need to do their jobs properly. Let's have a look at our objectives for this session. Number 1, you will be able to write your coaching notes using a 3-part structure. Number 2, you will be able to design an attention section to clarify the task and highlight the importance of the coaching session. Number 3, you will be able to add questions to your task analysis, which you have done in session number 1, to encourage participation during the breakdown. And number 4, you will be able to draw up a list of questions to check that the learner understands the task that you have just coached them in. So let's have a look at the 3-part structure. The first part is called the attention section. The second part, the breakdown. And the third part is called the check section. Each part is made up out of different parts. Let's have a look at them. In the attention section, you need to win the learner's attention so that they can focus on the task that they are going to learn. During the breakdown, you want them to leap to the knowledge that you are imparting to them. Here we use the past tense, leaped. And in the check section, we look at the 3 C's that you need to cover to ensure that the learning has taken place. So what does each one of these stand for? Let's go to the attention section. What, interest, and need. So during your attention section, you need to tell the person what are they going to learn. You need to create interest in the task that you are going to show them. And then you need to tell them why do they need to learn this specific task. The breakdown. There will be learning stages. E for explain, ask questions, practical, encourage them through praise, and demonstrate. So during the breakdown, you're going to do your training in learning stages. You're going to explain what the person needs to be able to do to complete the task correctly. You're going to ask the person questions to ensure that they understand the task and what you are doing. You're going to allow them time to do a practical during the breakdown so that you can see if they are understanding how to take it from theory to practical. You're going to encourage them to learn by giving them praise, and you will be able to demonstrate to them how to do the task. It's not going to be in that specific order. We just learn to do it by spelling leaped. In the check section, you will check verbally, practically, and conclude. So you will check them verbally by asking questions to see if they really covered all the bases of the task. Then you are going to give them the opportunity to do the whole task practically so that you can see and observe that they have really learned what you have taught them. And of course, you will then conclude your session. Let's look at the attention section in more detail. And we're going to start with the W, what. So in other words, you need to explain to the learner what they are going to learn. When you write the notes, you need to consider the following. You need to clearly state the task that you are going to coach. Within the what statement, you need to include the boundaries. In other words, what you are going to cover and what you are going to leave out. And you also need to include the specific equipment, method, materials, etc. that you are going to use during this task. I suggest that you use the following sentences so that your learner knows where you are in the training process. So you can say, today I'm going to show you how to. The task that you are going to learn today is, and then of course complete the sentence. The I in the win stands for interest. Now we are going to create interest by telling them a story, and you can choose which ones of these you will use, as long as you remember that it's got to relate to the task. So you can tell them a story, for example, of when you started doing the task and your experiences of the task, of someone that you have observed and what they've done right and wrong. You can recall a personal experience. You can give them background information about the task. And generally, I do like this. And all you need to do is to go and Google. It is amazing the information that you will find on the tasks that you are teaching the person. You can tell them about how it was done in the past, how it's currently being done, and how you think it will be done in the future. Of course, you can state facts and figures about the task. Or you can also show them pictures or diagrams. Once again, I suggest that you use the following words so that they know exactly where you are. So you can say, for interest's sake, let me tell you more about this specific task. Or, something of interest about this task is, and finish the sentence. The N, which is the last part of the attention section, stands for need, and another word for need is benefit. So in other words, you've got to be able to explain to the person how will they benefit if they are able to do this task correctly. Now, let's have a look at some of the words that you can use. You can say to them, it will add value to your experience. You can use the skill at home. You can use the skill at any other establishment. It will enhance your personal safety or the safety of your family. You can teach your children. It will give you status. And it will enhance your chances of promotion. There are many more that you can use. I want you to have a look at these, and you will notice that they are all personal benefits. So it is something that will add value to the person that is learning how to do the task. We do not refer to the company. So in other words, we don't say, and the company will benefit by if you do this task correctly. And the reason being is that often it is the same company that you asked a favor from that said no. And in the back of your mind, you might go, but why should I do this for the company then? And also, we never refer to how a customer will benefit from it. People will only do something if they benefit from it themselves. Okay, let's have a look at the words that you can use here. You can say, these are the benefits to you if you learn this task. Or, the benefits are. Now you will notice that number 3 came up just before I mentioned those sentences. Research has shown that people will only realize the importance if you give them 3 of those benefits. So that is the standard when writing your notes. So in other words, you will say, by doing this task, you will benefit as it will add value to your experience. It is a skill that you can use at home, and it will enhance your chances of promotion. One benefit alone will not do it. So basically, if we put the win together, this is what your attention notes will look like. You write it in 2 columns. You can decide if you're going to do the what, the interest, or the need first. It doesn't matter as long as you've got all 3 parts. But I've just kept it in the same structure. WIN. So your notes will have what? Today I'm going to show you how to complete the what by following the guidelines that we gave you earlier. Interest. Let me tell you how we did it in the past. Complete the sentence or use whatever interest you will be adding. And then the need. The reasons you need to know how to do these tasks are. Okay, so very important here is to go step by step and to write it out in detail. The rules of all coaching notes, presentation skills notes, and trainer's notes is that they are written so well that anyone can do the coaching, the presentation, or the training of your notes. So do not skip areas. Add in all of the details. This is your blueprint for future coaching. Okay, let's go to the breakdown, which spells leaped. Now here, I'm not going to go in the exact order. That order is just for you to remember the different parts that you need to include in your coaching notes. So we're going to start off with asking questions. And one of the easiest way to design your questions is to look at this little sketch that we've got, and we call it the 5 fat people sitting on a bench. The W's being the little bums, and the H, of course, being the bench. So what do they stand for? When you design your questions, you will start with what, when, who, where, and how. You will notice that I did not mention the why. During your breakdown, only 20% of your questions should ever start with a why, because why tests understanding. And at this stage, we don't want to test if they understand the reason for doing it. We want to test their knowledge for doing it. Now, you need to go to your task analysis. Now, if you remember correctly, in your task analysis, you would have had a column that said steps, and you would have had a column that says standards. Now, your questions will be in your middle column. So, in other words, you will have a step, then you will have a question, and your standard that you've written down will be the answer. Often when we ask something, because we've got more than one standard, you need to also say to people, very good, what else do you need to do? What else do you need to look for? What else is important? So that you ensure that for every standard that you wrote down, you ask a question. Now, don't make these questions too difficult. It is not there to give them a test. It is there to help them to think about the standard. So let's have a look at an example of your breakdown notes. Now, your task is to teach someone how to complete a spot risk assessment. You should have already written the steps, and you should have already written the standards. This specific section is the first part of your spot risk assessment. So you will notice I've got right in the task. Move your eye to the standards. The standards say concise, clear, and neat. Now go to the middle. What do you write in the space? How should you write it? Step number 2, write in the time. Go to standards. So your answers are when you're standing at the task being assessed and use the 24-hour clock. Go back to the middle and look at the questions. What time is written here? What format is the best to use? Next step, write in the date. The answer is date of assessment, the day, the month, and the year. So the question is, what date is written here? What format is the best to use? Write in the permit number. What do you need to ensure when you write in the number? That it's the full number, that you write it clearly, that it is the correct number. And why is the number so important? Next question, write in the name. How do you write your name? You write your name and surname as per your COI number. So just to reiterate, your questions should relate to your standards, not to the steps, to the standards. So in other words, your standards are the answers that you are looking for. So the next thing that we are going to look at is the L for learning stages. Now, this is the definition of a learning stage. A learning stage is a combination of steps required to complete a session. So when you coach someone, so let's say for example using the SPOT risk assessment, you cannot coach the whole SPOT risk assessment in one go. It's way too much information for the person that has got to do the recall or the actual task after you've taught them. So what we will do is you will look at the task that you are going to teach them, and then you are going to decide which steps am I going to combine to teach as a stage. Now you decide on a learning stage by examining the level of the learner or the delegate. So if it's someone that's never done it before, you might have more stages. If it is a person that's got more experience, you might have less stages. You also need to look at analyzing the complexity of the material. So if it is easy enough material, you will have less stages. But if it is a very complex task, you might need to divide it into more stages, as you need to check at the end of each stage that the learner understands what you are teaching them before you move on to the next stage. And sometimes when you look at a task, some of the elements just belong together, and it would not make sense to break something that makes sense together. Some of the material will also have a natural break in the information, and therefore it becomes a natural place to stop your learning stage. So we've got the learning stages, but what is the purpose of them? Well, not only is it for you to break down the information as you are teaching it, it is also there for you to see if the learner is snapping the information that you are giving them. And therefore we go to the P for practical. So after each stage that you have taught the person, you need to test your learner to see if he or she understands the learning. And how do we do this? This is done by letting the learner do the stage practically. So now I've combined steps number 1 to 7. That will be stage 1. I'm now teaching the person to do steps 1 to 7. Before I carry on to the next steps, I stop. And I now am going to check that they can do it. So you are going to say to the person, I want you to do steps 1 to 7 so that I can see if you understand what you have been taught. Now, during this practical, your role is to observe the learner. In other words, they need to do it themselves, practically. Do not interfere while they are doing it practically by asking them questions or making small talk. Asking the learner a guiding question if they make a mistake is the only interference that we ever allow. And that is also only if they can hurt or damage themselves. And remember to praise the learner before going to the next stage. So in other words, if we look at your notes or your task analysis, this is an example of what it looks like. Please remember, a stage is a combination of steps. And I want you to literally write down under that combination of steps. This is stage 1, step 1 to 3, and the learner must do it practically. So when your eye looks at the notes, you know that you've got to stop and you've got to say to the learner, I would like you to demonstrate to me what I have just taught you. When they are finished, you praise them and you say, good, let me carry on to step number 4. 5, 6, and 7. You stop and you say, I would now like you to show me steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. Please understand that they only need to do the steps as per the stage. They don't need to go back to step 1, 2, and 3. You've already checked that they can do that. Sometimes we forget that the last part of your trainer's notes or your coaching notes also needs a stage. Please just make sure that you complete that as well. So if we look at your spot risk assessment, this is just how I've broken it down. I've got your step 1 on the spot risk assessment is my stage 1. If you look at it, you will see that there's plus minus 9 steps. Stage 2 will be step 2 in your spot risk assessment. So there we've got 11 steps. Stage 3 would be to tick off the applicable fatal hazards. It is also to use your SLAM and SEEP, which in itself now, if you count it, is 8 steps. And then it is identifying the hazard and looking at how you will control it. So there you are looking at plus minus 12 steps that makes up that stage. And then your last stage is literally 3 steps. It is to write in your initials, the COI number, and the signature. If you want to, you can include that into stage 3, because really there's not a lot of information that they need to learn from there. Okay, so we've done your breakdown session. That's to complete your learner notes. We're not yet at how do we teach it. So now we're going to write your check section notes. And as we said, there are 3 C's. So we will start off with the verbal check. So verbally, you are going to test the person's knowledge by asking a series of questions. So you're going to ask questions about all of the steps and all of the standards. Now, if we just go back to your previous slide, as we said, stage 1, there's 9 steps. Stage 2, 11. Stage 3, between 11 and 15. Stage 4, 3. So just by counting those, you cannot have less than 25 questions. You will definitely have more. Do not skip a step and do not skip a standard. When you write down these questions, you write them in logical order. In other words, you start with the first step before moving on to the second step. This is not a test that is random. It is a test that is logical. Now here we use the word why. And this is the rule. 80% of your questions will now start with the word why. Because now we are going to test for understanding. Please make sure that you do not ask questions about information you did not cover during the coaching session. It will just confuse your learner. And remember that after every answer, you give them feedback. And keep the feedback short and sweet. Good. Yes. Correct. Now, for the practical check. Never leave this part out. If you do, you assume that the learner understands the task. And here, you will get the learner to complete the whole task unaided. Think about it like this. During your breakdown session, you checked that they can do it practically, but you only checked that they can do stage 1, then stage 2, stage 3. So your practicals were relating to the steps. In your check section, you want to see if they can combine those 3 stages or the 4 stages. So now you want to see if they can do all of it on their own together. Do not assist the learner unless they are completely stuck or it seems to be dangerous. Once again, do not ask any questions during the practical, as it might break their concentration. Observe and take notes for feedback. If they make a small mistake, you can correct it after the practical session. So this is an example of what your verbal and practical check notes will look like. So your verbal. Why would you give a clear but short description in the task box? Why is it important to write the specific time that you are completing the risk assessment? Why is it important to write the actual date of the day that you are completing the risk assessment? Why do you need a permit for your high-risk tasks? So what I suggest you do is you go and look at your standards, and for each one of those answers, you ask a why question. On your check notes, you also then write the practical, and you just write down there, learner to complete the full task unaided. And then, of course, you conclude. You don't just leave a session. That's like a plane landing and it's not letting its wheels come down. So you conclude it by adding in why the task is important, another fact that is interesting, anything that will conclude it properly. So if you look at it, when you are now finished with this session, you must have the following notes. You will have your attention section, which is the what, the interest, and the need, written out completely. You will have your task analysis, which we use in your breakdown, which will now have the steps, it will have the questions and the standards. And then you will also have a separate piece of paper that will then explain your checks. So, by the end of this session, you should be able to write your coaching notes in detail using the 3-part structure, the A, the B, and the C. A for attention. So you should be able to design an attention section where you will clarify the task and highlight the importance of the coaching session. The B for breakdown. By now you should be able to ask questions to your task analysis to encourage participation during the breakdown in stages. And last but not least, the C, you should be able to draw up a list of questions to check your learners' understanding. This is not an easy task, but everything is also explained in detail in your workbooks. Please go through it and ensure that you do it correctly. As this is such a difficult task, if you get stuck, WhatsApp me or phone me and I can go through it with you. Enjoy the session.